You Yes, Stephen.
Are we live? Can you hear us?
Finally, we're live.
We are live.
I've seen it on here, but
We are live indeed.
brilliant.
Oh, we can hear someone chat.
This is kind of cool. Rosie, you need to present your screen.
There we go.
There we go.
Presenting the whole thing.
Can you hear me okay, Stephen?
Can hear you absolutely fine, yes.
Excellent.
Can you see my? Can you see this? Can you see the BCS slides?
Yes.
Perfect.
Fantastic. All systems are go. So here we are in Manchester. I've got a glass of red wine to kick off the session, so it's going to be really good. I've got that feel. Ooh.
Sorry.
Oh. So, a couple of words of introduction, and then we'll get on to what you're really here for. First off, I'm Steve Sands. I'm chair of the ISSG, which is one of the specialist groups at the BCS being the Chartered Institute of IT. We've organized this whole session with these lovely people, that security company. And it's a session that's designed specifically for people who do cybersecurity, but it isn't perhaps their core role. They work in IT and they need to do some security stuff, but not necessarily always knowing exactly what or why. So that's the essence of what this is about. We're going to run for just short of an hour in the room here and online, of course. The lucky folks in the room here have got some beers and wines and things too. We've already started on them, let me tell you. But when we finish up here at about 7:45, I'm promised, fingers crossed, we might even have some pizza. So that'll be a great way to finish things up. How many of you here are here for the food versus the presentation? Food. Did any of you see the LinkedIn post that Eliza put on, was it yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does she like? Scotch eggs. And you know, we've ordered pizza, but we've got no Scotch eggs coming. Therefore,
I feel like I'm here to accept a prize.
For you.
Oh my God! And pork pies. I don't know.
What can I say? What can I say?
I'm not sharing them. Fuck off. I'm joking.
So far, the best ISSG session ever. So, that's the agenda. Can we get that on just a little bit? So I ought to just talk about who the BCS are, since We've kind of headlined the thing really and made some of the arrangements at least. How many of you in the room are BCS members already? Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. So you should know all about us. I could hand over to you. You could tell me. BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. So they're the professional body, if you like, for anything to do with IT. And if you're not a member already, then seriously have a look at it. It's very, very worthwhile. It's got the broadest reach across all areas of IT of any of the professional bodies. Where, if you're specifically on security, then maybe CISEC for you. But if you've got a wider interest in IT generally and interest in specific aspects of IT, then definitely BCS is worth a look. 3 grades of membership, I think: associate, member, and full member, and fellow. So that's us. Currently, we've got about 70,000 members, mainly in the UK, but spread around a number of countries as well. Truthfully, though, you just think about the number of people who work in IT. That's a drop in the ocean. Absolutely a drop in the ocean. So we would love more people to join and be part of our club and get some benefit out of BCS as well as put something back in. That would be tremendous. We have around about 50 odd specialist groups, of which I chair the information security specialist group, about 50 odd other ones. And that list is growing because just this week, we created a brand new specialist group just to look at quantum computing, because, hell, that's going to be around for some time to come. And we all need to understand it, what it is and what it can do for us, what some of the pitfalls might be, etc., etc. So just a quick rundown on ISSG. We're the largest specialist group, which I think is great, but it kind of makes sense, because we all know, if we work in security, that information security, cyber security underpins every other aspect of IT. It really doesn't matter where you work in IT, security is going to have something to do with it. Hence, I think it's right that we should probably be the largest. The ISSG has been around just over 40 years. We had a big celebration last year to celebrate the 40-year anniversary thing. And we've got a whole pile of events on our themes for this year, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there: cloud, quantum, third party, AI, of course. We can't have an event without mentioning AI, can we? And standards. I love standards. Someone's laughing already. Hey, no, I get that. So I love standards. Yes, please. So next couple of events, just to tell you about them, a bit of a plug. We've got one in London next Thursday, week today. That's on secure design. It's run by 2 guys from BT, absolute experts in their field, and they're coming to talk about how to secure by design and how to design offensively. So if you're into system architecture, secure architecture, secure design, definitely worth registering for those. Thank you very much, Rosie. And the next one is a little bit later on. It's in September. Actually, I'm on holiday. I shan't be there, so I don't care. Of course, I do. And we've got a whole bunch of speakers lined up for that. We've got a very well-respected guy, Mark Buckwell. We have someone coming from the UK Cyber Security Council, or CISEC, or both. Actually, I think it'll be both. And we have Patini from government to talk about principles, where we are with the chartered status for security architect, and how government approach secure design. So I think that's going to be a really, really good session. Definitely, again, something, if you can get down to London for it and be in the audience, then it's always easier to ask questions. But it'll be hybrid, as pretty much all of our sessions are these days. So get yourself on. If you're interested in doing more with the ISSG, we've got an AGM coming up as well, 12th of November. So enough of that. Thank you very much. So on this event, we can't do Chatham House rule. We never try and do Chatham House rule when it's hybrid or webinar or anything. It's just not worth, you just can't. So, and I think we have well over 100 people remotely registered for it. So we will try and deal with questions and answers, Q&A stuff, as it goes on. Fire them into the chat on YouTube. YouTube we're using, isn't it? Brilliant. So fire them into the chat. We'll try and pick them up as we go along. If not, we'll allow time at the end of the session to deal with the Q&A. before we all go up to the back of the room and demolish the beer and wine. Final question that we're always asked, is the session being recorded? Can I see the slides afterwards? Yes, it is. Yes, you can. We're going to get an MP4 at the end of this, send it across to BCS, and they'll load it onto the ISSG website. So that's about it. Have I got anything else to say? Might be one or two. Yeah, there's these guys. Trust me, I'm not going to read all that. That was on the page that you registered, so you know all about them. We know about the Scotch eggs, pork pies, and the haggis. Apparently, Eliza loves haggis. And since I'm from Glasgow, you know what's not to love about haggis? But I haven't got your haggis. I'm really sorry. No. I was brought up in Glasgow, lived there for about 25 years, and the accent comes back when I go home. But when I'm not at home,
have a few too many drinks.
Well, that can help. Yes, that can help. So I'm going to let you read that all at your leisure when the slides come out. Any more in there? I can't remember. I don't think so. No. So I'm going to hand over to these lovely ladies and enjoy. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
I'll have the microphone.
Oh, yeah, you both.
Okay, so there is a bit of background noise, Richard and Stephen. I don't know if you've seen my message. If you could mute until you... Thank you. Perfect. Okay. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Eliza May Austin. I'm the CEO of That Security Company. And what we're doing today is, it's a bit of brand awareness, I'll be honest, but we're kind of talking about our frustrations as a business. So we are sick to the back teeth of coming across efficient and talented and experienced IT leaders that understand that when they go and they buy something, so they've got a problem that they need to solve and they need something like a firewall or a router, right? So they want it to block stuff or they want it to route stuff or whatever. They go and buy it. It literally does what it says on the tin. So they can appreciate that. They can reliably expect that when they hand over that money, they're going to get the thing that they've asked for. In cybersecurity, those people are kind of being taken advantage of. So there's a lot of companies coming to us, having conversations with us, saying, we've worked with this vendor or this supplier or this massive company or whatever, like this group of charlatans, and they've got a particular problem. They're buying a solution for it, and that solution is not delivering. So it's not doing what it says on the tin. And the reason that this is pissing me off, quite frankly, is because it affects every cybersecurity company's image within the ecosystem of cyber defense as a market. We're also at this point where it gets incredibly harder and harder to try and solve problems because people are coming to us on the defensive, aren't they? We're having these conversations continuously quite often. So we're well aware of that. And one of the massive problems we see is that thing I just mentioned, where you go in and you buy something and what you actually buy is air, it's non-tangible, it's not specific, and it doesn't add any value that is evidenceable, which creates problems. So rather than just allowing this to continue, what we've decided to do is put this talk together, and we've got people on the talk that genuinely know what they're talking about. So everyone will introduce themselves in a minute and you'll understand everyone's credentials. And what we're trying to do with this is just arm people with a bit of knowledge about the practices that are going on in the cybersecurity market, so that you guys can walk away from this knowing a little bit more about how to handle those situations. And if you are in a position where you have been lumbered with cyber defense or cybersecurity in general, and you're an IT manager, accepting that, that's something that you're being graded on within your job, how do you go about doing that without being exploited? That's what this talk is all about. So hopefully you can all take something away from it. Yeah. Yeah, so it's PDF, but you can also take this. It's 2 pages, and the kind of things we're talking about today that are quick wins. So if you have to implement cyber defense, and this is something that is you are being held to account to deliver that, how do you go about doing it? Well, a starting point would be look at this checklist and just see what's missing in the company that you're in and go through and implement those things. So we'll just introduce ourselves now. So Rich.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Rich Benfield, Director of Technology at That Security Company. I've been with the business, excuse me, for around 18 months or so now. But I have a long, well, probably 25 years now career in IT and in particular IT management. So I have sat on your side of the desk for a very long time, and I have personally faced the same challenges that you have.
Okay, Stephen.
So I'm Stephen Ridgway. I'm COO and co-founder of That Security Company. I've got 25 plus years experience, having worked up through technical through to management via architecture and so on and so forth. Been doing things in cyber before it was even called cyber. So very happy to share some of the stuff that's worked and perhaps some of the pitfalls that I've personally fallen into over the years.
So I'm Rosie Anderson. I have been with That Security Company for a year. My background before that was recruitment. So I've gone from solving hiring problems for businesses that can't find the right staff to solve their technical challenges, to working with IT managers or cybersecurity managers who have problems they want to solve but don't know how to do that. Obviously, I'm not technical, but I can bring that helping solve problems to the industry. I regularly come across IT managers that are missold that cyber is really technical and it's really like this massive ethereal thing that you can't solve. And they think they need this massive amount of investment, but actually sometimes your problems can be helped with something like a cyber MOT, for example. So yeah, that's why I'm here today.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, could you please mute? Or yeah, wonderful. Sorry about that background noise, guys. So I come from a background in incident response, academically, digital forensics. That's what my degree's in. I wouldn't advise it. It's very fucking boring. And here I am getting further and further away from the tech and more into like a bit of a big picture kind of person. And the big picture, I'm a bit worried about the way that the cybersecurity industry is dragging IT. So that's our credentials. Hopefully, you've got a bit of faith in the things that we're going to say now. So I don't like it when I go somewhere and someone stands on the stage and tells me a load of stuff, and then I go and look on LinkedIn and find out that they are, sales or procurement or something, and I don't particularly like that. So hopefully, you've got a bit of confidence in what we're talking about. Okay, Stephen, on mute.
Yeah, this is going to be a good game, isn't it, tonight? So there are various things about trying to do cybersecurity where it's not the core of your job that make it difficult to get the outcomes that you and your business is actually aiming for. And there's some of the things we're gonna go through this evening. Will cover off the stuff that you need to be aware of because it goes on in the industry, as well as some of the things that will help you then to navigate that properly and end up hopefully with solutions that address your real business risks. One of the first things that I think it's worth bringing to mind is that some of the sales tactics within cybersecurity and information security are not particularly nice. There is a tendency to focus in on fear-based selling. So were you aware that you had this huge risk? Buy our widgets and you'll be 100% secure. Is the sort of thing to watch out for. There's a lot of this stuff going on. A lot of organizations end up going in the wrong direction from a cyber and infosec perspective because of this sort of stuff. And we hope to be able to argue with some knowledge that will help you to avoid falling for some of that stuff and have some good questions to ask to make sure that what you are being sold actually does align with what you really need.
So if you're unsure where to start, you can well bring in a consultant to help you understand your needs and your goals first. Finding the right consultant can be a challenge, so I would recommend that you speak to a few in order to find the best fit. You may be tempted to concentrate on finding a consultant that uses your specific technology stack, but cybersecurity is more of a business problem than a tech problem. I mean, yes, technology may well be part of the solution, but ultimately, you would hope to find a consultant that is willing to spend some time in understanding your business first and foremost, and then bringing that expertise to bear across all the departments. If you do have to go with a consultant that is more focused on the technology piece, then it's still possible to get a good result. However, you must be prepared to spend more time ensuring that their proposals fit in with the business as opposed to just foisting new hardware and software upon you.
So what we're seeing in the market at the minute with layoffs, I don't know if anyone's seen in cybersecurity market, company X is laying off 40% staff, company Y is laying off 40% staff, is there's been a massive push on products and tools and silver bullets that are going to solve all the cybersecurity problems. And what we're seeing is this massive bloatware of products that are all doing the same thing. So you've got XDR, EDR, MDR, it's all the same solution, rebadged with AI, for example. So this hyperinflating of this silver bullet will solve your problems is now, we're now seeing the result of that, because when these silver bullets don't sell, these vendors that have overpromised and underdelivered are now having to make layoffs. I'm just going to swap slides. Okay.
So one of the things to think about is that it's not all about the technology. It is fair to say, though, technology should be able to prevent the majority of cyber attacks, or it should be at least able to slow down attackers and make their life more difficult. But no matter how good the technology is, there's really no substitute for people who know what they're doing. So one of the things in parallel to thinking about what's the architecture, what's the technology, how we're going to deal with that, we'd really strongly recommend that you have a think about the people that you've got, what roles they're in, and do they understand the processes that they need to work with, not just in an incident, but in order to prevent an incident, in order to detect things, in order to recover from an incident afterwards. And it's worth bearing in mind that these people are not necessarily cyber people or infosec people or even IT people. Cyber incidents are cross-departmental. It's a theme which we're going to come back to. Cybersecurity, information security crosses boundaries within an organisation and pretty much touches everything that's going on one way or another. So making sure that when you're thinking about the people and processes side of things, you're also thinking about who would you need doing things like comms in an incident? Who's going to engage your vendors? Do you have support contracts that allow you to get the right people assisting you in a timely manner, those sorts of things. So bear in mind then that the people and processes are absolutely vital, no matter how good the technology is.
So in terms of rigorous IT processes, such as patching, RBACs and JML, if you have those in place, by default, you should be more secure than you would be if you didn't have them. Another thing that you can look at is the workflow of the various teams in your business. So just echoing what Stephen said about cybersecurity being embedded across all departments, across the business. So you want to think about, are they working securely? Are there any opportunities for data breaches, either on purpose or by accident? Is there any shadow IT to take into account? We're not just talking about IT processes here. You should delve deeper and look at what people in each department actually do.
Okay. So before we move on, I just want to acknowledge how weird this whole situation is. Not the situation we're talking about, the situation that we're in, because you guys have got this weirdness of two people remote, and then the remote people have got the weirdness of two people in person. So we'll get through it, guys. I think that the information is valuable. I genuinely want you to walk away having understood it. As I said, you don't need to take notes. But please absorb this as much as you can, because I think I genuinely want this information to be widespread within industry, that people working in IT have they've got a challenge on their hands here, and this is something that we're trying to address. So hopefully it's not weird enough that you can't absorb the knowledge.
Okay.
So yeah, okay, let's have a look.
Understanding what technology you have.
Okay, so in terms of understanding what tech you've got, the reason that's important is very obvious. If you don't know what you've got, you don't know how to protect it. So when it comes to attack surface management, just understanding what's out there. So I remember working at quite a large company, and they got a whole team together. They got suppliers, they bought tools. They did this whole project just to work out what domains they owned, because they didn't know, and it was so widespread. And they had marketing that owned some, and they had IT that owned others, and third parties that had bought others for them. So just understanding what you've got as a business, whether it's a domain or servers or laptops, whatever, just knowing what you've got is really interesting as an exercise, but really valuable in terms of understanding your attack surface management as well. Understanding outward facing infrastructure that you've got. So if you've got RDP, if you've got any sort of VPNs, anything like that, really good place to start, really quite solid. And then Rich, I think I was going to hand over to you on this bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So outward-facing remote access solutions, they get their own bullet point here because it's a big and important topic. Remote access solutions offer an obvious attack vector to cyber criminals. I mean, quite often a simple port scan will reveal port 3389 for Microsoft RDP. So it makes sense to look at your remote access solution in some detail. We have seen all manner of remote access mechanisms in place when working on consulting engagements with customers. Come to think of it, I've implemented several different solutions over the years as well. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses, so it's important to know and understand what the business actually requires and tailor the solution to fit the need. For example, if you have branch offices that need to connect back to a head office, this solution will look very different to what you put in place for one office with hundreds of home workers. Another thing to consider is the use of third-party applications, such as things like TeamViewer for remote access. Are you opening up yourselves to a supply chain attack when a different solution might eliminate that risk? So, understanding what technology you already have, you want to look at the technology estate as a whole. And you might well find that there's some overlap in functionality there. Can you reduce your attack surface area by trimming back some of the tech and in turn reduce the risk? Do you have any obvious security gaps or blind spots that technology should fill? And probably the biggest question of all, does everything you've bought in actually work?
Good question. It's hard to tell, isn't it? It's hard to understand an ROI when it comes to cybersecurity, but it's an important thing to have. And we'll go into ROI and sort of how to communicate financially with the board a little bit later. But Stephen, you had some points to add.
Yeah, I think one of the things to add to what Rich was saying there is that over the years, organisations tend to pick up a whole load of technology because they've been persuaded to buy it, whether or not it really aligns properly. And one of the issues we have in this arena is that there's a lot of snake oil selling within the cybersecurity, by which, in this case, what I mean, organisations that are looking to persuade you have a problem that their solution addresses, rather than looking to see what problems you have or what challenges you have as an organization and looking for a fit with things that they do. And it's definitely, this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges, unless you are reasonably well versed in how a lot of this technology actually functions and how that aligns to your business risk. It ties back to the fear-based selling stuff. You end up with things that you don't really need, and as Rich is saying, that then leads on to, well, you may actually end up across the whole technology piece with a load of things that actually aren't helping, or you don't necessarily need, or have very large overlaps in functionality. So I think, Rich, you're on the next slide. You're going to talk a little bit more about how to make better use of the security settings that you find in the tools that you may have already in your environment.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it makes perfect sense to do so. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, you can enable MFA on as many things as you can. So, Office 365, Google apps, right down to remote desktop connections, you name it, you can pretty much MFA it these days. So absolutely do that. You should regularly check your firewall rules around your open ports. Can they be closed? Is there still a business justification for keeping them open? Who knows? But they should be regularly checked and confirmed to be necessary. On networking, implement VLANs and secure them. Can a non-IT machine cross into a network segment where they shouldn't be able to? It's certainly worth locking down if you can. So with RBACs, and I'm sure everybody does this already, but control your user permissions via groups. That should lead to fewer security issues than applying permissions directly to the user accounts themselves. There are a lot of standard best practices involved here as well. Have you implemented secure password policies? Are you managing your software via Intune or Kanji for Mac or whatever MDM platform of your choice? And of course, when you're talking about end user compute, make sure your users aren't local administrators on those devices. We're talking about the inbuilt stuff that goes a long way to helping with security. One thing I always like to do is ban removable media, set group policies and things like that, and make the users use pre-approved cloud services like Google Docs or SharePoint, depending on which flavor of Office productivity suite you prefer. Oh, speaking of Google Docs and SharePoint, you should carve out private and publicly shared areas in separate folders, separate drives, so that you decrease the risk of staff dropping confidential files into something shared with a third party unintentionally. So there are tons and tons of things you can do here. You can look into server hardening on any new builds as a standard. Particularly with Windows servers, there's a lot of inbuilt services that can be disabled. Also, consider protecting end-user compute devices with firewall policies. You'd be surprised at the number of companies that rely solely on their hardware firewalls. But that doesn't protect you once they've been breached. So look to achieve defense in depth by layering these things. If you have a corporate office network, disable or unpatch the unused network ports. None of this stuff is particularly complex. So it's just a case of making it happen, really. I mean, if you unplug your disused network ports, there's no chance of a malicious actor sitting in your reception with a cable jacked into the network. And do split your Wi-Fi network from your corporate LAN. Make it a guest network, enable wireless isolation, and that way you're preventing lateral traffic movements. And of course, you can look at outbound traffic as well. Block unusual outbound traffic at your firewalls. I mean, do you expect your sales team to make outbound SSH connections? No? Then block it. And of course, that's not an exhaustive list. There's tons and tons of things you can do. But that's just to give you a general flavor of the sorts of things you can look at and hopefully apply. And it won't cost you anything bar a little bit of time.
Before we move on to the next slide, can I just get a show of hands for anyone that's been to a cybersecurity conference? Right, okay. InfoSec or whatever, right, okay. We've all been to them. Have any of you, I know I have any of you walked away from that learning about a problem you now have? No? No? Okay. I mean, I have. I've definitely gone to security conferences and had, whether I believe it or not is a different question. I've definitely had salespeople and companies and their brand shit telling me exactly what my problem is before they've even spoken to me. So that's the biggest thing when it comes to protecting yourself from an IT perspective. And we shouldn't have to have a conversation about protecting yourself from other professionals, but unfortunately we do. So the biggest thing is understanding your business that you work in, your role within that business, and what the strategy is for that business. We'll go into a little bit of strategy in a little bit, and how what you're doing applies to that business strategy. That's the thing that's going to arm you, really. So I just wanted to get a bit of a show of hands and sort of understand who's been to security conferences before. Even
Yeah. So picking up off where Rich got us to, doing the basics well is actually remarkably efficient, and it's both efficient and efficacious, as in it does work. It doesn't cost you a lot, and it will actually prevent a lot of cyber attacks. So, to put it in context, coming out of a conversation I had years ago with the ex CTO of GCHQ, the majority of successful cyber attacks, and by which he was talking about probably around 80% of successful cyber or information security attacks, would have been prevented by doing basics right. And a lot of the stuff that's in the basics is actually in the IT world, isn't specifically clever stuff in cyber or infosec. The other 20%, by the way, he would define as being stuff that was so complicated that you needed to be, working for a nation state defense team in order to understand it. So we're talking here about the most stuff that you see that hits the news could have been prevented by doing something relatively straightforward. And a lot of that stuff is actually in the IT arena. There's a list of stuff that we've put up there. This comes from a brain dump that we had when we were discussing this as a company a little while back. You can pick out of there various things. MFA is easy to implement. People don't have trouble with it anymore. It's not the panacea to all authentication issues, but it definitely makes things harder. Having role-based authentication, so people can only do things that they're supposed to be able to do. Keeping on top of vulnerability and patch management. Even if you can't keep on top of vulnerability management, just keeping on top of patch management actually addresses a lot of the vulnerability side already. Non-complex passwords, use password managers. Yes, I know there are arguments around whether putting all your passwords into one tool is more or less secure than having lots of individual passwords. But the reality is, when you've got, as people do now, literally hundreds. I think there's about 600 passwords in between the two password managers that I use. I couldn't manage that. With long, complex passwords without reusing passwords, So, without a password manager, it just wouldn't be possible. Thinking about secure build standards, which you touched on, there are some really good ones out there for pretty much any operating system that you can think of. There are standards out there. Microsoft has got their own standard. CIS provide really detailed standard and build docs for almost anything that you can imagine. Macs, Windows, Linux of various flavors, and then all sorts of other bits and pieces as well. Thinking about risk management is important. Bearing in mind that security goes beyond the technical controls, as we were saying, the people, process, and technology piece is something that doesn't require a great deal of investment or a great deal of complex programs to deliver. It's just making sure people are thinking about this stuff. Then the other side of it is, as we'll come on to in a minute, begin to think about stuff within your own organizations. How do you actually work out what you need to do? How do you go about explaining that to the people that make decisions about what's going to get funded? And how do you actually go about putting together a security program?
Stephen, can I just jump in and ask you a question?
Sure.
That I think is quite important. When it comes to the point on proprietary software and applications, so a lot of companies will not have the budget for a dev team, they'll not have the budget to outsource, but there'll be someone internally that says, oh, I can automate that.
Yeah.
And then they create this tool that is efficient, it does the job, but also potentially, we don't know, potentially introduces vulnerabilities. And if they can't afford a penetration test, what would you advise them to do? Or actually, maybe they can afford it as a company, but that person that's head of IT does not have budget for a penetration test. What do they do?
Yeah, I think that's it's a very common but a somewhat thorny area. I've worked in organisations that have had the approach of common off-the-shelf tooling first, and then will only go and have things developed if they absolutely need to. And you get into arguments around what becomes customization of a tool and what's actually just configuration of a tool. But where you've got people who are spinning up things that make their own working lives easier, that's kind of okay. But where those things become, or where critical business processes become dependent on some of these things, there isn't really a shortcut to ensuring that you've got good, those things are well developed. You've got good understanding of what your expectations are as an organization. It's probably something that you're going to have to get cross-departmental agreement on, and probably needs to be kind of lifted to the right level of decision where risks are being owned within the organization. Because in the end, it may well work. Yes, your business processes may work wonderfully with it. However, because there's only one person that you can kind of point your finger at, that is introducing a risk. The likelihood of something going wrong may be therefore somewhat greater. The impact equally may be difficult to assess. So I think it becomes a risk question more than anything else.
Fair enough, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to get onto common pitfalls. There used to be a time where we've not been hacked yet, was, showing return on investment. And that doesn't cut it anymore. You've got to show that the spend that you're making is delivering. So where we are now versus where we were, it's difficult to show that. Your board, if you have a board, or your director, your finance officer wants to see, what are the tangible findings? How are you making the business more secure? If your budget is 100,000 or 100 million, what are you spending that on, and how is that saving our business money? How is that resolving risk? So having things like tangible findings from a pen testing or vulnerability management, that will show that, but also that remediation work. And having things that link to a risk register showing how your security spend is either mitigating risk, reducing risk, or making the business more profitable is what you need to show to your board. What we'll find is salespeople, and I am a salesperson-ish, I'm a solutionizer, but my role is to help you unpick problems. If you're being scared by a salesperson to solve a problem that you didn't know you had, like Eliza was saying before, you're being sold something. You understand your business. You have that tribal knowledge of what your business looks like, how it works, how it makes money, and also what's important. We've had people come to that security company, and they want to have a pen test of a website. Okay, what does that website do? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't take payments. It hasn't got any different headers. It doesn't take anything monetary wise. It doesn't hold any proprietary data. So why do you need to pen test that? Oh, we did it last year because we were told we needed to. You make sandwiches, your production software, your manufacturing, surely that needs to be pen tested. That's how your business makes money. That's what needs to be secure. Or your HR systems that hold proprietary data and PII. That's what makes businesses more secure. So have a think about what's relevant to your business and what your business does and where your crown jewels are. And that's what you need to make sure is safe. Not a website because you've been told that and sold that by a previous provider.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, no, I was going to say, I totally agree, Rosie. I think one of the areas where, as technologists, not just as InfoSec or cyber people, as technologists, we struggle a little bit, is to align what we're doing to address business risk as opposed to technical or cyber risk. So if you asked any of our senior consultants to look at anybody's systems and assess them for risk, their starting point is almost definitely going to be, oh, well, look, there's a whole load of really clever techie stuff that I'm scared about here because it's been done like this. But if you ask the same question of somebody inside the business who's not in technology, they're liable to say to you, well, oh, actually, yeah, okay, we're aware of that. It's all, the code's all a bit old, but actually that doesn't drive any critical business processes anymore. That particular piece is, it's legacy stuff. We're winding it down. We've got mitigating controls around it, so we don't need to worry about that too much. So understanding business risk I think is one of the most important things that you can do as a technology leader or as an information security or cyber leader within the organization. Make sure that when you're putting together your strategies, your visions of where you need to get to, that you're addressing risks that your CFO or your CEO would look at and go, oh yeah, okay, I get that. I see why we need to address that. One of the things to bear in mind is that in the minds of most board members, all risks are financial ultimately. With the exception, perhaps, if you're in the NHS, the risk might be somebody might die, I suppose. But the vast majority of risks can be articulated in terms of finance. So, understanding then how to talk to people in that, talk to other people outside of the tech area in that language is really important. In getting them to buy into the things that you may see as being obvious that need to be done. And there's just one final thing then on that.
Sorry.
It's all right, don't worry. There is no point in trying to push your organisation to be more cyber mature than the business is business mature. So there may be times when you'll look at things and think, oh, we really need to address X, Y, and Z. But in order to do so, you've got to unpick so much immature, established business process that you're just going to get pushback the whole way. In which case, you need to get it on the roadmap. Fine, but don't expect you're going to go from nowhere to a standing start to 100 miles an hour at the speed of a Tesla. It's not going to happen, and you'll just antagonize the people that you need to have on board. So be careful to make sure that when you're thinking about maturing your organization, you're maturing it in line with business maturity. So a few of the things that we can think about then in how we can make cyber or InfoSec a success within the business. Planning is key to a lot of things, and that as you say, as it says there, fail to plan to fail. I can't remember whose quote that is, but it's one of those ones that comes up in all these management training meetings, isn't it? So we're all kind of aware of that. But one of the things to bear in mind in that space is that a lot of these information security projects are interdepartmental. So cybersecurity kind of touches everything. IT touches pretty much everything one way or another, but cybersecurity absolutely touches everything across all business processes in the whole organization. If you're implementing change that's cross-departmental change, it has to be handled in a very different way to the way that you handle implementing change which is wholly within your own department as a manager. So you have a lot of autonomy to change how things are done within your own arena. But as soon as you start imposing business process change on other departments, you've either got to line them all up, or got them buying into. I can't speak today, can I? Got them buying into the whole process, or they will just look to undermine you throughout the process, and you'll end up getting nowhere. Now, one of the ways that you can do this is by focusing on developing a strategy and presenting a strategy which gets buy-in at the right level within an organisation. I think we're going to go on and talk about that in some further slides in a minute. But getting buy-in and understanding that the things you do are going to have an impact and can actually even be a financial impact on other departments. You're going to need their support to get these things done.
So how do you know that you're on track to deliver strategically aligned business benefits without a strategy to align to? Well, in short, you don't. Without a strategy to align to, you'll be spending a lot of time, effort, and money essentially painting by numbers, doing security by numbers. And this will only get you so far. I mean, it's a good start, obviously, but it doesn't address the fact that the best results in cybersecurity come from addressing business risk, and business risk is what feeds into the strategy. So that's why you need one. Also, there is a perceived issue with all things cybersecurity in that it's generally considered to be the department of no. If you do not deliver against a strategy and just go your own way, then how do you know that what you're delivering on the cybersecurity front actually enables a business to succeed safely? The whole point of a strategy is to allow the company to go about its business with the minimum amount of obstruction due to cybersecurity, whilst keeping the people, processes, and technology safe. And for those of you working in regulated industries, you know that cybersecurity is an integral requirement to even participate in those industries. So the cost of not delivering strategically aligned business benefits could actually be huge.
Oh, right, sorry, change slides. Work.
Yeah.
So how do you design a strategy?
Right. Sorry, struggling to come off mute then. So
It's fine. You just have a minute because you've been chatting away. But what I just wanted to start off by saying is, everyone's heard the word strategy, but does anyone know how to make a strategy? Like, raise your hand if you. Right. Okay. So some of you probably do, just don't want to raise your hand because you're introverts. Which is fine. But I do come across quite often people that are in positions of authority that don't know how to create a strategy, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is, and it's one of those things that you learn by doing. So an analogy I like to use is that of, if I said to you all, I want everyone to be at the Big Ben by 11 p.m. tonight. Everyone knows what the goal is. They know what the vision is. They've all got to be at the Big Ben. They kind of know what the starting point is. They're here, but you all need to either get in your car, get to the train station, get to the airport, depending on where you are. And then you got to get to the Big Ben. Now, the strategy is the movements that you make and why in between. So your strategy is going to change depending on what your starting point is, what method of getting somewhere that you're going to use a train, you're going to use a car, you're going to walk, you're going to skip. All those different things are going to underpin the way that your strategy is designed. So that's just a key way I like to analogize it. I think that just bearing that in mind when it comes to IT and cyber defense is quite a handy one, really. It's not the end goal. It's not where you are now. It's a method of getting from where you are now to the end goal and the steps that are involved in that.
Okay, Stephen.
So in order to do that, there are a couple of things that you need to think about. And the first one being is you actually have to know where you are to begin with. So understanding the starting point and understanding any weaknesses in your current setup is the critical starting point for getting a strategy in place. Gap analysis of current security maturity it doesn't have to be anything like as complicated as Deloitte will sell it to you as. Just a common sense approach. If you look back at the thoughts you might be having around cyber basic hygiene, how good are we? Just on a scale of 1 to 5, are we kind of all right with this? Do we know what we're doing? Have we got the processes? Do we have some tech? That sort of stuff. So it doesn't have to be a big, complicated, expensive program of gap analysis. It can literally be just take a step back and have a think about it. Then have a look to see where those gaps align with potential actual business risks. And once you've got those two pieces, that begins to focus in on the things that you need to do. You can then look to say, right, in an ideal world or in the next step, or when we've got this sorted, what would that look like? What do I need? What does it need to work like when I've actually completed dealing with that? So you've then got your end game. That's your vision. Okay, so you've got your starting point, which is what the current state. You've got your future state, which is your vision. The strategy is how am I going to get from where I am now to where I need to be in a certain period of time, and what resources am I going to need in order to get there. If you can summarize the vision and you can explain the vision, you can explain why that's addressing real business risk, and you can then talk about how you get that sort of funded and whatever. That gives you the stuff that you need to go back to the CFO or whoever in order to talk about getting funding and getting approval for a cyber maturity program.
So I'm quite conscious of time. So what we'll do is we'll smash through this a bit. And what I'm going to do is stay on this one for a minute. It's just condense what we're talking about really in this slide. So when you are defining, can you go on mute just for a second, Stephen, please? Thanks. For him, it's silent. For us, it's like white noise. So when you are defining your strategy to get sign off for the changes that you want to make, and a lot of the time, if you're in a SME, those changes are not going to be massively labour intensive. You are going to come across points when they are, and you'll just need to recognise where the resources are that you need, and delivery. So when you're delivering something or when you're prepping for something, you're going to be using other people in the business, and you need to be able to articulate to more senior people or board level people why it is that you deserve the ownership of those resources for that period of time, and then to achieve the thing you want to achieve when they might be needed elsewhere. So in terms of risk assessments, just taking a common sense approach. You don't have to be a genius to do a risk assessment. Obviously, if you're doing a risk assessment of a major project, that's going to be slightly different. It's going to be a bit more intricate. But when it comes to making certain changes, if you're able to say, if we don't have, yes, like we might have to pay extra for MFA functionality on these things. However, if we don't, we might have to pay this much in ransom. So there's all those kinds of just conversations that you'll need to understand. When it comes to building that picture of where you need to be, having a high level roadmap, even a visual one, really, really valuable as well. Having some sort of high level indication of the costings that's involved. So there'll be CapEx and OpEx. So you'll be able to be in a position where hopefully you can say internally, long term, it's going to cost this much, short term, it's going to cost this much, and we've got this amount of cost that's going to be in tooling and whatever. But a lot of the things that are on this checklist, which is downloadable via PDF as well, is all enhancing what you've already got. So we're not sending you away and saying go and buy a load of shit. What we're saying is go and look at what you've already got and try and make the most of it. And we're just trying to give you a bit of strategic oversight of how to do that and actually get some buy-in internally. So yeah, so in terms of doing a bit of a risk assessment and producing a high-level roadmap, provide the information that you're giving to the board off the back of that.
Okay, common mistakes, what we typically see. If your strategy is we're going to buy X tool, it's going to do this for us, that's not a strategy, that is a benefit analysis for a tool. So it doesn't really explain how you're solving a business risk problem. In fact, tools don't even need to be considered at this stage. At the strategy level, you should be saying something like, this year, we're going to tackle insecure remote access in order to help mitigate the risk of threat actors breaking into our network. The answer may well be to enable MFA or purchase an identity management tool. That's further down the line. That's not your strategy. That's how you're going to implement it. We also say people are going to consider technology, but the people and the processes, you can buy all the tools in the world, but if the people aren't going to use them and your process is so adverse to the way your business works, that's just going to be a wasted tool. Cybersecurity affects every single business department at every level in your hierarchy. Some departments are really heavily tech focused and others are less so, but you're going to have far more success and much deeper impact if you cover all three aspects of people, process and technology. Getting the buy-in from your people and they understand why they're doing these things is what works. If what you're buying isn't relevant to the business, you're buying tools because they're in fashion, because you've been sold it by snake oil at a conference or whatever, that's not going to help your people. You're going to completely switch off the staff that work in your business, and security is going to be a blocker. If you neglect the basics to do what's in fashion, that's, you're going to have problems down the line. You've got to get the basics right, and we have covered what those basics are. But even in this day and age, having things like default passwords, implementing MFA, updating firmware, keeping your patch management under control, for some businesses, that's enough. That is secure enough for the level of risk that you have in your business.
And we see that all the time, don't we? So we see like penetration testing customers that will have, they'll have insecure passwords, or they'll have plain text passwords, or they'll have like something hard coded in some S3 bucket or whatever. I don't really understand what I'm talking about, but basically, really basic stuff. And then we'll do the pen test again a year later, and they'll have not have taken the aftercare package, and they'll still have those vulnerabilities that are in place, and they're exactly the same ones. So they're just wasting money. So there is a complete wastage of money and resources and just brain cycles in not doing these basic things. Guys, I just want to push, like, let's go a little bit quicker because we want to get some pizza. Well, I do.
Okay.
I can pick up from there because I do appreciate we are now between everyone and their pizza, so which is not a great place to be. Look, a few common mistakes to think about. We don't need to go into these in great detail. Well, I had a couple of them I'll pick out, but overconfidence is easy. That's just the. In fact, that's overconfidence. So overconfidence is that feeling of this is going to be really easy to implement. Let's just get stuck in and do stuff. Financial anchoring is. I mean by that. In some organizations, your value as a manager is measured in how big your budgets are, how big your teams are, things that are not necessarily actually useful to the business, but that's just kind of the way that the business rates and ranks its people. So we see fairly regularly in certain types of organizations, the concept of selling the strategy in order to get funding, rather than selling the strategy because the strategy is actually doing something that business really needs. So that's a pitfall to avoid. Status quo bias is obvious. It's the we've always done it that way approach, the resistance to change. Trying to outsource accountability is something that we also see quite regularly. In the end, even if you've outsourced the responsibility for doing things in cyber, the accountability remains within the business. If you try to outsource accountability, it becomes very painful for both the organisation and for the supplier or provider. And I was going to say it rarely works. It actually never works. I've never seen that successful, although you may not realize it's not successful until you're in the middle of some kind of disaster and stuff isn't working the way you'd expect. Another pitfall, herd instincts, false consensus, just picking up from talks and conferences can be very dangerous in this respect. You go to something that's cutting edge, you'll be in a room full of people that are all interested in cutting edge stuff and all sitting around going, yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, we really got to do that. Unless it's aligned to your business risk, it may not be really cool for you. It might be really cool for some of them, but there is no panacea. There is no single solution that fixes all this stuff. So just going with the crowd generally costs money without adding much in the way of security. Being aware that there are some trends. Everything. A couple of years ago, everything had to be automation, SOAR. Then it all has to be machine learning. Then it all had to become AI. And the answer is, all of those things have got a place. But if you're buying a tool because it's the latest cool acronym, it's probably not doing what you're expecting it to do. Confirmation bias and selective recall, it's kind of psychology here. If you've got a view of how things should be or how you want them to be, there is a human tendency to find the evidence that supports the thing that you want to do, rather than going out and actually challenging yourself or asking people around you to challenge you on whether what you're about to do is really right.
I do that all the time. I Google why it's okay to have a third glass of wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Well,
is it okay to have a third glass of wine? No, it's why.
And why Scotch eggs are keto.
Yeah.
And on that then, last two things really quickly here. Lack of alignment with business budget timelines. There is no point if your financial year, budget year ends, let's say end of December, there's no point in going to the board in January saying, I've just dreamt up £1 million program that's going to solve all your problems. because the likelihood is there is no money, or even if there is money, it's allocated to other things and you've missed the boat. So understanding how to time this stuff is really important. And there was a bottom one there, which I now can't remember what it
Oh,
was.
sorry, wait there. 1 second. I've also realised I didn't think to put the QR code
Oh
on.
yeah, and alignment with business strategy. Actually, quite frankly, we've probably spoken enough about aligning with business strategy energy anyway. So yeah, well done, Rosie.
Okay, right, give me 2 seconds, people in the room, so you all see my laptop. Hopefully you can hear me. I am going to find in my downloads. Yes, I have got memes as a folder, because that's the most important thing for anyone to ever have as a folder. Anyone who is now online. Okay, I'm giving this to the people in the room, but for anyone who is online, so we have got we have this as downloadable. I don't think the QR list is on the slide, but we have a checklist of really easy things that you can do that don't cost you any money. This is sold as like a secret sauce, like cybersecurity is this magical mystery genie tool that you need to go on. It's not. We've condensed this as to what quick wins you can do. So for the people in the room, you've got this. We will ask Steve to send out to anyone who signed up online the actual checklist. So things like enhanced spam filtering or internal auditing, asset registering, understanding what you've got. Are there people in the business that have still got sign-ons that have left? Have they moved departments? Some real quick wins, multi-factor authentication, for example. These are all really, really good things that you can implement really quickly. If I just zoom in to 100%, maybe a bit more.
What I will say, guys, is that I think the nice thing about this is, as a company, we're very pro open source. So we don't care if you take this and just go into whatever company you work in and say, I've come up with this idea. This is my checklist. I think we should do this. Go for it. Smash it. Don't care. As long as you just remember us as the people that gave you the idea. And then you come and ask us for advice when you need it, and obviously pay us for that advice. But this is just something we're throwing out there. Hopefully it helps. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I think it will. Pass it off as your own. We're absolutely fine with that. And I think that's it. I don't know that we've got any other comments, but I wanted to leave enough time for questions. So any final thoughts, Stephen?
We've covered it all. Make sure that what you're doing is in line with business maturity and that the stuff that you're putting together actually addresses real business risk.
Okay, cool. Rich, have you got any final thoughts?
Just make sure that whatever you do makes sense. Don't let yourself get sold to. Really try and develop an understanding of what you want before you go and speak to the salespeople.
Rosie, any final thoughts?
Rich stole mine. You can do a lot of things yourself. Obviously, if you need support, go and get that from people that you trust, from your peers. Don't go to a conference with a problem in mind and come away with 7 problems that you think you now need to solve. Look at the basics and look what's relevant for your business and your level of risk that's aligned to your business, not just to what's in fashion.
So I guess I would end on just trust your own tribal knowledge. So, if you've been in IT for a good number of years, you are in a more powerful position than whoever is trying to sell you a product that you think that you need. You probably do. Maybe you do need that product, or you do need that service, or you do need to rectify that particular vulnerability. But interrogate what you already know and use your ability to find the information that you need to action that, rather than outsourcing brain cycles to somebody else. So has anyone got any questions online or in person? We've got no in-person questions. It's quite cringe. Someone asked me what my favourite cheese is.
What's your favourite cheese?
Wensleydale.
I was going to say about one of the biggest things is the unknowns. So how likely are you going to get a data breach? Oh. So there's a lot of unknowns out there. You hear there's a chance of data breach, there's a chance of a ransomware attack. how do you work out what that risk is in financial things, so you can then put that as part of your bottom line just in case, and then work out how to then mitigate that by saying, okay, there's a £5 million risk. If I spend £500,000, it's going to come down to 2 million.
Can I answer that? I'll pass over to you in a minute, Stephen, but I did want to say that various different threat actors have quite predictable amounts that they ask for in some cases. So understanding yourself as a business will enable you to understand your most likely adversary, and understanding your most likely adversary will be able to give you the information around what kind of things they ask for during a ransomware incident. Also, if you're a company selling polymers, so you sell plastic, right? Potentially quite an interesting target. You start selling polymers for children's toys, not that interesting. You start selling polymers that go into making syringes for the NHS, you then all of a sudden become part of the ecosystem of something quite valuable. Therefore, your threat landscape changes a little bit. So knowing where you are, who you are, what your position is, as in the ecosystem of not just our country, but internationally, gives you an insight into who will be interested in you. Having that insight into who is interested in you gives you the insight into what they ask for and what they demand. There's a lot of interesting queries as well at the moment around cyber insurance, and companies that have cyber insurance to a certain limit then all of a sudden become high targets for ransomware threat actors, because they can say, I know you can afford it because you've got cyber insurance. So there is no negotiation needed from the threat actor perspective. So it's a really interesting question. Has anyone else got something to add on that?
Yeah, I have, because I would answer that from a different perspective.
Go for
I
it.
think that within your organisation, there are people that know the value of any particular business process. The thing is, they're never asked, or they're not asked in a way that they understand how to give you the answer that you need in order to come up with that thing about, well, the risk is X million, the investment in fixing it is X 100,000, therefore it's worth doing. You need to be able to talk to people like the CFO in language that they get. Okay, so if you say, well, if we get hit by ransomware, what's it going to cost us? They will probably look at you and go, I've absolutely no idea. But if you were to say to them things like, if the following business process was offline for 5 days, how much would that cost us as a business? Now, I've consulted into some very large organisations over the years, and one of them was the world's largest manufacturing organisation that made small white sticks that you would set fire to. If one of their factories was to go offline, they would cease making small white burnable sticks. At the rates of millions, millions a day. They could very quickly tell you immediately how much it costs them in lost profit for having one factory down for 1 day or 1 hour or whatever it might be. So if you say to them, well, okay, what's the what was the cost of WannaCry? The answer is, well, we don't really know. But if you could say to them, during the WannaCry incident, this factory in Latin America was taken down for 3 days. How much did that cost you? They go, oh, that cost us X million. So it's being able to phrase the questions right and being able to ask the people that actually know about the financial impact of things not working the way that they're supposed to be working, that gives you that ability to do a good sort of cost analysis on your strategy.
I think there lies a big example of how people can get the wrong end of the stick from one different answer. So I don't know who answered your question right, or if both were right, or if one was wrong. But I was looking at it very much from a threat actor perspective, and Stephen was looking at it very much from a business perspective. And I think that is part of the problem in cyber.
I think they're both valid.
Yeah, both valid, but
one of the things you can sometimes see is, think, am I being used just as a target to buy my tactics before I go after the bigger target?
Yeah,
I'm still affected.
Yeah. No, you're right, absolutely, 100%. And for anyone that couldn't hear what this gentleman just said, was talking about the fact that you don't really know where you stand as a potential victim of a threat actor. And, you know, are you actually the target, or are you being exploited to reach a different target? And it's an interesting question. Third party chain attacks is a big deal, and it's very, very prevalent. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, but understanding where you sit in the supply chain is integral to that. Thank you, Stephen. Have we got any questions online that are interesting and not just like, what's your favourite type of bread?
Right.
Has it? Oh, bloody hell.
That's bang on.
Any online
perfect.
questions? No? No interesting ones? All right. Well, we'll move on to pizza. Thank you so much to the British Computer Society for having us. Round of applause.
And can I just say thank you to all of our speakers, Rich, Stephen, Eliza, of course, Rosie in the room here. It's been a great event, and we've touched on so many things. I mean, I've been in this game for quite a while. You can tell from the grey hairs, etc. And I think back, so until fairly recently, I was a CISO at a fraud prevention agency that processes data for pretty much the entire banking sector, and we processed fraud and error data for pretty much all of government. So quite a bit of data, and none of it's ours, and everybody's dead nervous about it. So I often say that I feel as if we were audited to death. Now, the interesting thing is that in all of those audits and all of those conversations I've had with the data owning organizations, when they come in to talk to us about how we do security, they are generally interested in the basics. Yeah, that I can't remember. I don't think I've ever been asked, tell me about the AI tools that you've deployed. They want to know how I control against ransomware. They want to know how I do my security testing of new deployments of our software. They want to know how I protect our perimeter, how we do VPN, how we do starters, movers, and leavers, all of the things that we've been talking about today. And it always, always, always comes back to being able to articulate the risk. So that's always a starting point. Understand what your assets are, understand what your systems are, the things you're trying to protect, work your way down. So what are the risks? And if you can't articulate those risks to yourself and to your board, you stand absolutely no chance of going out and buying the tools that you need to defend against it. So it's about the language that you use when you're articulating those risks to the board, who need to release the funds so that you can go and get the people to run the processes and the tools that you need to do the defense. Yeah. So it is all about the basics. Understand the basics, the risks, and don't start at the control, start at the risks would be my advice. Yeah, always. So I made lots of notes. Don't want to keep it back from the pizza here in the room, but I made lots of notes. Security's hard. You know what? Sometimes we make it harder than it needs to be. And if you don't deal with the basics and jump off to the fancy new stuff, you're doing the wrong stuff. You're starting in the wrong place. So focus on getting the basics right. And security is about, final point, is about three things. It's always been about three things. It's about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And depending on what your business is, one of those might be more important than the other. Not always confidentiality. Sometimes availability is the king. That's the thing that you're trying to protect. So I'm done. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to all of you who came, and thank you to everyone online. It's been a great session, and I hope we can repeat it again. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.